experiencing horrifying suit jealousy now.
I think the audience is just going to assume Lake is all of our boss.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am wearing
okay.
alma mater hoodie that I got when I graduated a million years ago. This is very fancy.
Wonderful.
I tried for so long to get the background to work, but my environment just doesn't lend itself very well to it.
Yeah, mine like when you have too many things in the background, it kind of doesn't work.
And we are live.
Oh, well, okay. Hi, people.
Hello.
Hooray!
Hello.
All right, well, thank you everybody for coming to join us today. I'm so glad to have you. For those who are joining us on Twitch, this is a panel on Nico. It's one of the new Planeswalkers that's dropping with Caldheim. We're very excited to have so many of the creatives who worked on it with us here today. My name is Xiaoling. I will be moderating. I am part of the LGBTQ+ group within Wizards. Big part of our work is to make sure that Wizards is an inclusive space. We love having opportunities like this where we get to engage with the community. And so Garrett, wave your hand, Garrett, will also be helping me. We will be tracking questions on Twitch and also on the Discord. If you are not on the Discord, you do need to go through a process to sign up so that you can chat with us there. But I will be hanging out there. So if folks do want to come and chat with Wizards, we will be around for the rest of today. Okay, for our audiences, please, let's go around and introduce ourselves. Talk about who are you, what are your pronouns, and what do you do at Wizards? I'm probably going to go by alphabetical, and Allie, do you mind going first?
Sure. So my name is Allison Steele, she, her, and I am a product manager at Wizards of the Coast. I work on Magic Online, so that is pretty far away from narrative work. I dabble in it occasionally, and this was, fortunately, one of the projects I got to be involved in.
Yeah, Chris, tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, I'm Chris Mooney. I use they, them. I am a card designer, a game designer for the Magic team. So I make a lot of, work on a lot of Commander products and a few main sets far in the future that we haven't really learned too much about yet. So I can't really say more than that. Yes. Similar to Allie, my day-to-day job is not with the creative team, but I had the opportunity to help out with this character, which was awesome.
Garrett, care to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Garrett Turner. I also use he, him pronouns, and I'm a narrative designer on the creative team. I primarily work on sort of the behind the scenes of how we define our characters for all of the different partners who write or develop or deliver our characters to the audience. So yeah, I sort of have a role that reaches out kind of tendrils into a lot of different places.
Katie, can you introduce yourself a bit?
My name's Katie Allison. I use they, them. I'm on the Magic world building team. And obviously, as you can tell from the others, we all wear a lot of hats generally, but my primary job is to develop Magic's creative text, which is card names and flavor text. So I do a lot of work telling compelling stories in as few words as possible. So it was a nice stretch for me to get to work on a more fully realized character with a lot broader space to work in.
And last but not least, Lake.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lake Hurwitz. I use he, him pronouns, and I work as the principal visual development and concept artist for the Wizards franchise. When we were making Nico, that meant that I was still the principal visual development artist on just the Magic franchise, but that's expanded to also include Dungeons and Dragons more recently.
Awesome. So I'm delighted to have you all here today. I think there are hopefully a lot of folks looking forward to hearing about how did Nico come about. Now, I don't believe all of you, based on your introduction just now, not all of you actually work normally on the Magic team. Like, how did this all come together?
So our characters are developed a little bit differently from project to project. And sometimes that will come from a mechanical idea, or sometimes that will come from a story idea or a character idea. And Nico particularly was one of the latter. That came from a real desire to create a non-binary hero. And so I was asked to sort of spearhead a team, and reached out to a number of people to ask them to sort of join the development team for this character. So that's how I was involved. And I guess I'll sort of open that up to everyone else here.
What I remember is that when you were doing that, we had to really plead with everyone's managers to get some of their valuable time.
Yeah.
It's true. Probably easiest to make the case for me, but I know it still felt like a real treat in how differently it felt from my day-to-day work. And I really liked the way our small team did this. We spent a lot of hours with just this group in small rooms, coming up with a huge variety of different concepts for characters that could have become Nico. And that was actually some of the most fun creative work I've gotten to do in a long time.
Yeah, I should call out, there are many people that are not in this room that we owe a lot to creatively. And I'll give a special shout out to Sarah Winters, who was kind of working in tandem with me to make art for this project, and was a huge part of just bringing everybody together and collating ideas and stuff.
They turned out amazing detailed concept art, faster than I thought was humanly possible for so many different concepts. Really spectacular work from the art team.
So maybe a contextual point that might be useful here is that generally when we develop characters, we're not just settled on a single character from the beginning of the process. And so when people are saying Sarah churned out concept art for a bunch of different characters, generally when we develop a new character, we will have several different concepts sort of competing with each other. And those will go through various rounds of review and iteration. And Nico is the one that ultimately came out of that process as sort of the champion of that process. But earlier in the process, there were a number of different characters.
Actually, that might be a great segue to, hey, what inspired Nico specifically? Like for this character's design, what were the things you looked at? What inspired you? What were you guys looking at when you're looking at how do we craft a backstory for Nico? And also the visual design.
Chris, I felt like the way you described it in the article we did recently was really great. If you wouldn't mind reprising some of that.
Yeah. So we talked about a lot of different, potential directions to go with the character. Something that I sort of expressed in one of our meetings that sort of became, I think, one of our driving forces behind this character was sort of, we were looking for a story that felt really that people, non-binary people, would be able to it would resonate strongly with them. Myself being a non-binary person, I tried to bring my experiences and feelings about my journey through that to this process. But we didn't want to create a character that was only defined by their gender identity, by this one specific aspect of their life, where everyone is so much more than that. So we wanted to find a story that had that core, but that also went beyond that. And the core of the idea that sort of we centered on was this idea of somebody who lived in a world or a society in which there was a certain fundamental idea that was kind of passively accepted by everyone as being the way that things were. And that this was a character that would sort of look beyond that, start to question, okay, is that really true? Maybe it's true for a lot of people, but is it my truth, right? Is it the thing that defines my life? And that they would through that process, you know, move beyond and get to the sort of the Planeswalker part of their journey. And so yeah, we liked that idea. We thought it was an idea that was, you know, resonant to the non-binary experience, but also universal and could apply to many other people in many other walks of life. And from there, it was really we went through a lot of different options on where it would make sense. And Theros was sort of a world that existed in the Magic universe or the multiverse that people knew about and seemed to have a paradigm that sort of fit this, especially with the events of the most recent Theros block. The people who live on Theros do have this idea of fate and destiny and of the future being foretold, and that's a very important concept to them. But we also know through the actions of many of our protagonists that the way that things are foretold, the way that things are supposed to turn out, aren't always how they turn out. And we liked using this character to explore that idea, and in turn, allowing it to fuel their personal journey.
I also think one thing.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Katie.
Just one thing that made me think of also is that separate but related, I think we decided early on that at least if possible, we wanted to craft a spark ignition story that didn't revolve around trauma. Not that Niko's spark lighting moment was peaceful and purely happy, but there was excitement and hope and novelty in it. And while plenty of our other Planeswalkers obviously have compelling backstories, I don't want to sound like I don't like any of the trauma-based ones. That's how a lot of our Planeswalkers' journeys start. And it seemed like a great opportunity to intentionally approach it from a more hopeful perspective, sort of launch a hero onto their journey in the multiverse rather than forcing them to leave behind everything they ever loved in a horribly traumatic way. And I like where we landed with this one.
Yeah, there was something really powerful about that, taking that step of really finally being able to embrace for Niko who they are. And then that being the step that leads them out into this, you know, expansive multiverse full of possibilities, full of the potential for them to finally do the thing that has always really been important to them, which is use their skills to help people, right? You know, Niko's a character who has been feeling in their time on Theros like they have been put in this box that says, no, you're an athlete. You're going to go through the signs and signifiers of, you know, martial prowess, which on Theros is things like, you know, the javelin and sort of think, you know, Olympic Games style kind of competitions. But Niko is someone who's always wanted more than that, and for whom destiny has actually been a bit of a box. And so being able to step out into the multiverse and now say, now I can use all these abilities that I've been developing through all of my rigorous training as an athlete, it's sort of a really powerful moment for them where they're able to say, this is who I am. And then they have this incredible vista to go explore and begin being them in a way that's going to benefit them and is going to benefit the multiverse.
I guess one other layer to that I don't know at least was intentional from the start for me, but that I like about Niko's origin is that there's sort of a counterpoint to the chosen one narrative where, you know, classically a hero or a hero to be is plucked from obscurity by a destiny that they never knew they had. They're basically forced to rise to heroism because they are chosen. Niko's kind of the opposite. They were told, I mean, you can be this kind of hero. You can be an athlete that a lot of people look up to, but no, that's your path. Other people are supposed to go off and fight monsters and save people. And they said, no, I want to be a hero. What are these skills for if not helping people, saving people, changing the world? And they had to fight their destiny practically with fists to do so. And I think that's pretty cool.
I think that's wonderful that we're presenting not just one type of hero, but that there's alternate hero paths within the world of the multiverse, and that Niko has chosen a different one than they were prescribed. You know, I want to take a moment and kind of take a little step back and catch up, folks, for people who may not have read the blog post, which I think we've shared the link on Twitch if anybody wants to go check that out. You know, who is Niko? Like, what is their story? Can we, like, I think we can spoil it a little bit for people here of, like, you know, where are they coming from, and what's happening when they join us in Caldheim. And there is a cat.
Well, I'll start because I think it'll segue nicely from what inspired the creation of Niko. A lot of the time when we're making Planeswalkers, we have some knowledge of how they're going to fit into Magic's overall narrative. And because they were going to be appearing first in Caldheim, we had Tyvar Kell, who was our other Planeswalker that was appearing there, who was going to be kind of our boots on the ground, knows the world, knows everything about that. And Niko, both as a planeswalker and also in the story in which they first appear, is someone who has a fresh perspective on everything around them.
Yeah, so knowing that we sort of wanted that contrast, we were sort of able to say, Niko's story is going to start in a different place. And unlike a lot of planeswalkers that we introduce, we're going to come in on Niko's story just after their first planeswalk, rather than showing their spark moment. Does somebody want to talk through a little bit about what Niko's background on Theros was?
Yeah, I can do it. So we've alluded to it a lot, them being an athlete. So Theros, our Greek mythology plane, is full of fate and destiny and oracles. So Niko, as a young child, was taken to one of those oracles and given a prophecy of their destiny that sounded pretty exciting. It was, you are going to be just an unbeatable champion javelin athlete. You'll never miss as long as you work for it. This is your life. Congratulations. And that did indeed become their life. Their family was supportive. They had incredible skill. They trained hard. They had a life a lot of people would have dreamed of. And as we've already alluded to pretty heavily, they felt quite trapped by that over time, because they were developing all these skills and being called a hero even as an athlete, and in their mind doing nothing of real value. That in fact, being called a hero particularly got under their skin, because they wanted to scream, I'm not being a hero, I'm performing, I'm not using my skills to help people. So their big moment, amazingly, was when they decided to really test the power of that destiny and see if they could, in fact, miss at the highest level of competition. Turns out it was hard, but they did. They did it on purpose. They missed through the competition, shocked the world, and they were delighted. Because even that little act of defiance meant fate actually didn't have ultimate power over them. Unfortunately, that was exactly when the events of our most recent Theros visit took place, where a very angry god rose up from a long sleep to try and make everyone follow their destinies again. And a magical agent was sent after Niko to force them back onto that gilded cage of a path they were on. And that's the moment when their spark ignited, because even that taste of freedom was so life-changing for them. They knew they were actually destined for more. They knew they could choose their own destiny. And that's what ignited their spark, pulled them to Caldheim. And that is literally where we meet them in their story, having basically landed through a process they don't understand on a completely different world, to have to figure out who they are, who they're really supposed to be, and where they are and what worlds are.
Yeah, if anybody hasn't seen yet, there's a set of 2 stories that are featuring Niko's arrival on Caldheim, and the first of those was published yesterday. I really encourage you to go check it out. But Niko is landing on Caldheim not even knowing what a planeswalker is, and so they are really starting from ground zero, sort of trying to understand what's happened to them. Because as far as they're concerned, Theros was the world. And now on this very different, snowy, Viking-inspired kind of world full of sort of more rough and tumble characters than you generally might see on Theros, Niko is sort of having this adjustment period as they are going through trying to figure out how to be and what happened to them and what to do next.
Yeah, something that was interesting to us. We didn't plan all of this out ahead of time, but certainly as we were developing the character, it became clear that there's a lot of awesome sort of experiences. There's parallels between Caldheim and Theros as these sort of mythological worlds, right? They have a big emphasis on epic stories and gods and what it means to be a hero, right? It's interesting to go from a world where a god is a constellation in the sky with ultimate power to a world where a god is a dude you get a beer with in a bar, right? And so I think, to get a little bit on a larger looking at Magic perspective, we have seen a lot of, stories of people like right after their first planeswalk, but it tends to be like, we get like the scene of like, oh, I'm in a new world. and the story kind of stops there because it's just sort of the origin story and it's a setup for something else. I think it's cool that we're going to get to spend a little bit more time with someone who's just arrived in their first Planeswalker and get to go through that experience, because it's one of the few experiences that is really shared among all of our Planeswalker characters. And it's not often that we get to really spend time with someone. So I think that it's really cool that we're going to get to see that. And we've already seen the sort of first part of it.
And if you do read the story, you might get to see Nico have a drink with a god. So
And play a really adorable magical game with a cat. Go read the story, honestly. I'm very unbiased and it's great.
So I know that in our creation for Nico, like the team was very, very mindful. We've already kind of talked a little bit about that, about how to approach it. You know, would you guys mind digging a little bit deeper into like what were really important principles for you in developing Nico and telling their story that you wanted to make sure kept were at the forefront for this character? And maybe a little bit about like, hey, what does Nico mean to you as a non-binary or a queer creator?
First, do no harm.
yeah, I think
that is really beautiful.
one of the places that was sort of one of the like prime directives for us as we were developing Nico was the idea that this is an expression of a non-binary experience, not the expression. Nico is never intended to be a universal or to be representative of all people of a particular group. They're meant to be an individual and to identify as non-binary, but their non-binary experience is meant to be their own.
We were wary from the beginning of tokenizing, I think, too. We, like, from day one, we said, this will not be the non-binary character. This will be a non-binary character. Hopefully just the first of more. We can't talk about anything, but we very much want them to be a person, a hero in their own right that people can relate to, that's awesome on a ton of different axes. One of which is being a cool example of a non-binary person in our multiverse. But hopefully, we didn't just want them to be queer representation. We want them to be a really cool character that lots of people, whatever their gender, could see themselves in. And maybe one of those reasons would be, hey, they're non-binary like me.
This had a really interesting logistical expression that you're reminding me of. We go through a bunch of different kinds of processes when creating new characters. But one that we have used occasionally and that seemed right for Nico was when we began the process of ideation, we all got together over the course of several days, just pitching idea after idea after idea after idea. We had a really solid brainstorm where everybody brought something from their own personal experience to bear. And through collaboration and group discussion, we were able to find the themes that were the most resonant, the ones that would fulfill all of these principles and goals that we were trying to achieve, and maybe leave some of the less interesting or less useful ones in the dust to eventually arrive at a place that encapsulated a lot of just the more expressive thinking.
I mean, Charlotte, you mentioned what does Nico mean to any of us personally? I mean, it's been said, but I don't think it can be oversaid that just as a fan of Magic, having a non-binary person there is really important, because I don't know about other non-binary folks in the audience, but it took a while for me to even realize this was an option. Like, that who I am exists in the world and I could maybe call myself that. So putting people like that in our also otherwise exciting Magic-filled heroic worlds, I want to see more of that in every game. People deserve to know that they're valid and see expressions of their own identity being awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I have the same thing, and you know, it might be, maybe this is an experience that is especially concentrated in non-binary people, sort of in the current times. Like maybe in a future, you know, generation, there will be kids who grow up knowing that that's a thing long before I ever did, because I had the same experience of, it was a while before I even knew that that was a thing, let alone something that I fully understood as expressing how I felt, right? And I think that that is where that core of Niko's story comes from, right? It is the idea of growing up in a world where everybody believes a certain thing, and that is the truth, and not even in a malicious way, not even in a like, oh, we're gonna keep you in line way, but just that that's the way that their life has always been, and it's been true for them. And sort of being enabled, having the freedom to say like, okay, I really want to interrogate that truth, and like it might be true for you, mom and dad, but is it also true for me, right? I think that that is experience that is true for non-binary folks, but again, as we said, is also true for I think a lot of people in a lot of different elements of their life, even who don't have this. To get a little bit less sentimental, a little more on my magic nerd side of things. One of the things I really love about Niko is that Niko is a blue character. We knew from the beginning that we wanted this to be a blue character for sort of mechanical reasons. And one of the things I think when we think blue, we think people like Jace, who are very smart and intelligent, and they use their intellect to maybe be a little bit a little bit of a brainiac, a little bit of a know-it-all. But blue has a lot of different elements to it. Niko represents a lot of these that I think we don't get to see very often. One of them is sort of on the sort of more athlete side of things, the hard training, the ability to improve yourself through hard work and dedication, and just being, really focusing on it with practice, I can become much stronger, right? But the other thing, which is more tied into the backstory, is the idea of just questioning your reality, right? That curiosity that allows you to go beyond what you maybe see with your eyes or have been told, and say, the way it isn't the way that it has to be, and I am going to question everything until I get to the truth that's right for me. And I think that that is a really cool element of the color blue that we don't get to see a ton. So I love that element of Niko as well.
Actually, can we dig into that a little bit more? And I'd love to hear from other team members, because we have a question from Matt, Mother of Dragons, in our channels. They're actually they're curious specifically about how do you compare and contrast Niko with another white-blue character like Dovin, in terms of both the narrative and design sense. And it sounds like to me, as we're discussing, that like you guys are aware that there's these other planeswalkers in this ecosystem, and I'm surely that was part of your thinking of like, how does this character balance against these? So looking for that from narrative or design sense, I think we could totally nerd out a little bit about mechanics if you wanted to get into that.
I jump in before we get into mechanics on this thing. Like often our blue characters have this knowledge focus that's really about seeking out all of the information. And Niko is extremely intelligent, but their motive is a little bit different. They're on a journey of sort of self-actualization, where it's about coming into who they really are, and the curiosity and discovery of the world being about the expansion of horizons, right? There's something that I know has sort of been important to me in my life, is that as I go beyond each sort of bubble of my own community and explore another one, my point of view gets a little broader. It helps me understand who I am a little better than I did before. And that's really Niko's relationship with knowledge. Whereas a character like Dovin is using knowledge as a scalpel to take people apart, right? Or to achieve his own ends that are really related to order and imposing rules. Niko is about trying to break through those barriers using knowledge and discovery as sort of a vehicle to accomplish that.
Well, I would add, this part's a lot more straightforward, but as their first card iteration is blue-white, I think we can all agree the white part's a little more straightforward. They very much want to be a hero. They care a lot about right and wrong. And it blends well with blue in this case because they care about right and wrong, but they're also on a journey of intentional discovery of what right and wrong really is, because they know now they can't trust the common knowledge, the wisdom handed down that's treated as default by society. They need to determine for themselves what's truly right and wrong so they can be the hero that they want to be.
I know Allison was trying to.
Oh
speak
no,
up.
they said it.
Okay, got
Sorry,
it.
Allison.
Better words.
I will just to Xiaoling mentioned a little bit of the mechanics. This team was not responsible for creating the Niko card that you see in Caldheim, but we definitely put a little bit of thought into it, thinking of what are some power suites in Magic that we don't have yet that would be fun to have. I know, like, I definitely remember that, like, Ali and I got in a room and just wrote down, we knew what Niko did story-wise, and we just spent like half an hour writing down every possible thing we could imagine a card doing that would be an expression of that. I think that the set design team for Caldheim really did a great job in terms of, the way that the relationship between mechanics and story in Magic is that there are many ways that you can pair the two, and no one card will ever represent everything that someone could possibly do. I think that this is an amazing first card for Niko. It has a lot of cool abilities on it, and they really tie into what Niko does in the story. But then there's also so many other possibilities that in the future, we make so many different versions of each Planeswalker that it's great to have those, like, they have so many different things that could be represented on a card. I'm looking forward to seeing those in the future on future Niko cards.
Well, that even lines up well with the narrative side because they're so early in their journey. It's entirely reasonable that their powers will develop in new ways. They'll find new cool stuff to do with them. They're a very creative, smart thinker. So I can only imagine what they're going to figure out they can do with those mirror shards in the future, which may line up with wild cards.
That really touches on a point that going back a little ways, like one of the other things that we sort of set out as like a keystone goal for us was a power set that really could express the character's creativity and tactical thinking. And I know I'm incredibly excited about where the character's powers sort of landed because there is so much potential for them to use that tool set in a lot of different ways. Katie, I think you said something in the article at one point about, we were looking not to create a cannon of raw power, but like a toolbox, if I'm remembering that correctly.
Yeah, basically Niko's magical powers in someone else's hands might not be that useful. It's because of how Niko uses them, their creativity, their dexterity, and just their incredible skill at throwing things.
Yeah, it's the mind behind the powers that makes them work.
Yeah, it should be noted that Niko's athletic prowess is not a magically gifted power. It's the product of their own hard work. One of the things that ties back to what this process has looked like for our team is that in many ways, creating Niko brought mechanical and narrative and art design into alignment in a way that strengthened all of the different pathways that those had for communication within all of the teams at Wizards. We had already been doing it, but bringing everything to bear in a way that was so collaborative really redefined, what potentially could be the kind of rules of thumb of going forward of how to approach character design.
Yeah.
Do you guys mind digging into that a bit more? Like, I think a lot of our audience would love to hear about how do the card design mechanics, art, story, how do these cross inform each other? Because my understanding is we actually did a lot of these at the same time. It was simultaneous. So there's a lot of back and forth. And specifically because Setsu in the audience wanted to know also about the pitching process. So kind of like how do those materials come together when you're preparing a pitch? I think we already answered that. Like we did a bunch of pitches for a lot of different potential characters. And Niko is this is the first one to come out that we're very, very proud about. But like, I think hearing about how those interplay would be great. Also want to say for the audience out on Discord and on Twitch, we'll be taking questions. So if you guys want to drop them into the chat, try to hashtag them with questions so we know that that's a question from you, and we'll be happy to give it to the group here. So
I'd just like to provide a little bit of context at the beginning here, which is that because Wizards has so many different teams, they don't always get to work on the same thing at the same time. We're often working on different timelines. We all have different deadlines. And because of that, sometimes powers get made before narrative, get made before art, get made before card mechanics. Sometimes it's the other way around. In this case, we were able to do a lot of that work simultaneously and concurrently, which meant that we were able to communicate more directly than we would normally be able to.
I can answer one part of something that I see here, which is it greenlights the project. Like Garrett mentioned earlier, characters get developed in different ways depending on the needs of the particular project, so it doesn't look the same every time. But usually, the greenlighting is sort of the first thing that happens in some capacity. We have decided as a company, as a team, we would like to put a new Planeswalker in something like that. Here's what we know, which in Niko's case was they need to be blue. Sometimes there are more specific requirements than that.
Well, we knew that they were opposite the other Planeswalkers that were in the set. We knew that.
Right.
Yeah, so that we knew a little bit about the space they needed to fill, but there was little prescribed beyond that. And that part, though it looks a little different, is usually fairly consistent, that before we even start pouring resources into designing character pitches, we need to know there's at least likely to be a space for that character in a specific project, not just generally creating them to find a space for later.
Yeah, which Planeswalkers appear in what set is an incredibly important part of development for that set and that story.
Yeah.
And goes through many rounds of discussion and revision.
Yeah, because just for fans who maybe don't exactly understand, like it is when you think about it, right? It's like, all right, you've got a Magic set. There may be 3-ish Planeswalkers that appear there, right? But those Planeswalkers have a lot of implications in terms of who's on packaging, who's going to appear in the narrative that's written by the creative team, who, like the cards in standard, right? Like there's so many different elements, and so that's where things like colors come in, right? Which is like you kind of want to have a mix of colors, both so that in standard you don't have like a bunch of Planeswalkers that are all in the same color that go in the same deck, but also for in the story, it's like, all right, well, if we have all of our red characters together and maybe their personalities and power sets kind of start to overlap, and then maybe that's an issue, right? So there's a lot of thought that goes into that, like really early in the process.
I mean, add to that the fact that we have I don't know what the exact count is now, like over 30, maybe over 50 Planeswalkers, and we only get to shine a light on 3 or 4 of them at a time.
Yeah. To address a little bit the sort of like how are characters pitched and how do they make it through the process, like Katie said, the process essentially always begins with identifying a need for a character. Once that's happened, a team is put together to begin the process of building that character. And the first steps in that will be generating very loose concepts, sort of a general pitch for the character's personality or some iconic feature, maybe crossed with a power set or something like that. So I would describe them as character sketches. If they were written out on a page, it wouldn't be more than a couple of paragraphs. And I think using Niko as an example, I think in our initial sort of brainstorming and pitch sessions, we must have ended up with about 15 to 18 concepts. I don't remember the exact number.
Which was unusually high because people cared so much. That was unusually high because people cared so much.
Yeah.
Also, the refinement process then is not that we take all of those 25 or whatever characters we've come up with and pitch them all. There was a process of us sort of fleshing out and culling that list as we went until eventually we as a group figured out what we thought our very strongest concepts were based on a bunch of different axes and wound up presenting, I think in the end, we presented 2 pretty fleshed out potential characters that were both amazing, and Niko won out by a hair.
Yeah,
it's worth.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's worth noting that when we're talking about like how many different characters, right? Not all of those are as fully fleshed out as the final form, right? Most of them are quick ideas, and for instance, some of them are ideas for backstory, and some of them are ideas for power set, right? It's not always the same full element, right? Really, not only when we narrow it down, not only are we getting rid of sort of the ideas that we think are going to bear out as well. But we're also combining the ideas where it's like, oh, well, that idea for the backstory really matches well with this idea we had for personality and that idea for power set. And maybe if we put those together, then we start right. So they sort of congeal is maybe a gross word, but they come together during the process.
That early part of the process really is a great way to sort of spread all of the ideas out in front of us that are sort of important to us as we develop the character. And as much as sort of the beginnings of a specific character, it identifies all of the things that we find truly important. And so, like Chris said, as we went along, a lot of those different things sort of merged together to create a couple of more concentrated concepts. To address really quickly who greenlights the project, that can depend a little bit, but it tends to generally be a creative director, ultimately. And that person, may change, obviously, like people come in and out of seats and stuff like that. So, I can't point to a specific individual or something like that. But generally, Magic releasing a new Planeswalker is a pretty big deal. And that goes pretty high up the chain of command.
Run one quick thing, since this is just such a juicy question. To very briefly touch on the final part of the question, which is sort of the card design mechanic story or like all that stuff. Just very briefly, since I'm on the card design side, it tends to be that for certain cards like Planeswalker cards or specific legends that are important in the story, that who that character is, what their personality is, what actions they're taking in the narrative, what their powers are, all that stuff. That tends to be sort of at least roughly outlined, if not nailed down early, and the cards are sort of designed to match those. But for a lot of other things, including like even a lot of legendary creatures, it can often work the other way, where the set design team will come up with an awesome idea for a legendary card, and the creative team will be like, all right, like how am I, what kind of character can I craft around this to get people excited and interested in it? So it tends to be, like the real important big characters that are going to show up a lot. The cards tend to be designed to fit them. And a lot of other things go the other way, where it's the cards are designed and the creative team is able to bring those designs to life.
I think to pull it back just a little bit to the general question, because obviously we're all game design nerds who could get into the details of this for
right. Yeah. I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but yeah.
No, I'm sure it's super interesting. Just I feel like to make sure we answer the general question is that as might be obvious, all of those things do inform each other. It's a symbiotic relationship. One of them can't work without melding with all the others, but usually one comes first, at least slightly. So in this case, it was just that they're going to be a blue character and probably non-binary. I think Tyvar started early with, we would like this character to have something mechanically to do with elves. So that makes it pretty clear that creatively, they were also going to have something to do with elves. So usually that's generated at the we've decided we need a character stage, and everything else builds on that in ways that again look pretty different, but is meant to all be like pretty well synthesized by the end.
Right, and there are so many great examples of where that synthesis comes into play. There are tons of times where we have awesome cards that have like great beloved cards with great mechanics that are designed entirely around whatever the flavor was for a character. We also have elements, like I always like to think about in the original Innistrad block, where the climax of the story was Liliana of the Veil using the ultimate ability on the card Liliana of the Veil to force someone to sacrifice something. So they do. I think one of the things, I'm just gonna start talking about how much I love Magic now. One of the things I love about Magic is that and it's a lot of hard work, and I'm glad I was able to be part of this process and to see some of the the overlapping and the collaboration. But the people at Wizards really do so much collaborative work, and it's very difficult. But I think the results are that you get an amazing game where it really feels like all of the different elements are speaking to one another, and that's what allows it to be so immersive.
Well, the really shocking part of that is we did all that collaboration by being often printing
Right.
things out on this stuff called paper and
Yeah.
handing it to each other.
Imagine that. Imagine being in the
Those who
same
didn't
room as
experience
one
it
another.
before times,
Yeah.
it was very helpful for collaboration.
If I could dovetail a little with what Chris was saying, one of the things that's really important, just sort of generally about working at Wizards, is there is a ton of interdepartmental collaboration. And when you're generating any creative thing, you have to be willing to I guess use the idiom "kill your darlings." Like, you have to be willing to adapt your ideas. And I think a lot of people, when they hear that, feel like that process is sort of like some sort of sacrifice, or like is compromise, right? Like, it makes the product worse. But when you're really working with a group of people who is so invested in the same goal and is so willing to sort of push toward, the top line things that we're trying to accomplish, it becomes much easier to say, well, okay, like that element that I really loved, it's no longer serving that goal. And so we've got to let that go, because Chris or Katie or Allison or Lake or whoever, came in with a better idea that accomplishes the goal more. And that's also true when you have, a narrative designer like me, for example, having a conversation with a game designer who's saying, okay, but, we're really going to need the card to be able to do this. So how can we make sure that those things are working in harmony with each other? And it means that everybody has to be willing to sort of say, okay, well, if we shift our idea this way, maybe we'll be able to get to a place where this is a little more sympathetic and where everything is a little more cohesive. And this process was wonderful in that regard. Like, I can't overstate how amazing everyone here and all of the people who are not in this panel were in helping make that happen with this character. And I just sort of want to say, like, thank you so much to all of those people, because it's been really
Ditto.
for me, and I'm sure that it has been for everyone else here.
I miss you all.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I would actually even add to what Garrett was saying there, that, like, I think overall, one of the most important things to learn as a game designer, whether you're on creative, mechanical, both, something else, is learning how to, as best possible, differentiate between an idea you're attached to because you are personally just attached to it, you came up with it, it's one of your darlings that may need to be killed, versus an idea that you find yourself attached to because it actually has a core of something that really accomplishes the goal, even if it's not immediately obvious, and learning to make the case for those things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Critical thinking,
Speaking of that,
self-knowledge.
Perspective is huge.
So sorry to cut in, because we actually got a comment from Discord by Matt, Mother of Dragons again, that's right on this topic that I want to just bring on in with the whole idea of killing your darlings and having to really collaborate. So Matt's really wondering, did Nico ever have a different power set during the whole design process? Because you started with a lot of different planeswalkers, and then you had to go through a revision and a passing and a choosing and a selection, and then you got to Nico. So they're wondering, did it ever have a different power set? And then what they say is, I love the shard motif and design and play and power. So that's a question from Matt that I thought really just fit in the conversation.
What did the
Yes,
shard
you do.
not do at some point?
The short answer is no. Nico always had the power set that they have. But the long answer is what the shards actually accomplished, what the shards were, all of the permutations of that went through dozens of iterations.
Let me chime in with here, because I think this is a really important part of character design. Before they had that power set, they weren't Nico.
Yeah, that's true. In fact, naming comes really late in the process once you've got a pretty good sense of the character's like personality, origin, power, refining to be done on those things. But you have a pretty good base sense of all of those, and you give them a name that fits that in some capacity, even if it's just that it sort of intuitively sounds good for that person.
Yeah. By the time they were even close to approaching having their own identity, the powers were completely locked down.
Yeah.
Although I actually think one relevant detail is I think there was a point where we experimented with the idea of their accuracy being at least partly magical.
Yeah.
That was one thing that led us to dig in discussion to no, actually, their aim and their athletic prowess is non-magical. That is hard work, talent, dedication, practice. The shards have powers. Nico has skill.
Credit where credit's
Right.
due. I think the throwing accuracy came from you, Katie.
So I don't actually know if I told you guys this ever, but I was a javelin champion in high school.
No way! You didn't tell me that.
What?
I
This
figured this would be a nice time in front of the world to.
Oh my gosh!
this is
Now we know.
This is top 10 anime betrayal stuff here. I can't. How did we get through that entire process and you never said that?
Would you believe I just never thought to mention it?
You know what's
only
funny?
because I know you so well.
Yeah.
Do I believe that?
One of the things that's funny about that too is Niko's at one point was specifically sort of like the knife thrower archetype.
Yeah.
And when we started talking about Theros, it was like, that doesn't feel quite right anymore.
Right.
Katie sort of stepped in at that point and gave us this beautiful olive branch of like, no, javelins. That's
Right.
really going to sort of like help us tie this together with Theros and make.
I thought that I thought of it just because it was Theros, but I feel like in retrospect I did not.
But now we see the secret motivation behind it.
Right.
But
Now's the time for me to tell everyone that when I was a baby, my parents took me to.
yes.
Oh.
On a more
that's
serious
awesome.
note, though, like making light of that, like it beyond that, like we all put something of ourselves into this character, right?
Yeah.
And everyone who works on a Planeswalker, who works on developing a character, I think for fiction in any way, does invest personal aspects of themselves into that character. And I think one of the things that has made Niko the character that they've come to be is that everybody in this conversation and a bunch of other people, you know, have really personally invested in that character and really care and have
Absolutely
been willing to sort of have vulnerable moments and say, you know, this is a thing that really matters to me, that I'm passionate about, or there was an experience in my life that really helped form who I am. And those things really informed the character that ultimately has sort of made it out into the world.
Yeah,
That's really
Sarah
true.
in particular really informed Niko's fashion sense and sense of style and self-expression, and brought a lot of her knowledge and experience to bear crafting that.
Niko's hair is so cool. I think their whole style is awesome. Having had really, I'm a words person. I didn't have much to do with the visual development, so I can gush over it without it be bragging. Like, I think they're wonderful to look at, very cool and aspirational, and I kind of want to be them when I grow up.
I think this might be a good moment to interject that the background that we see here, we actually have a version of this that's available for everybody who wants a copy. So if a moderator, James, will help us distribute that. Like, honestly, during the process of design for that backdrop, I'm like, Niko's too beautiful. Niko is just so, like, yes, there are much amazing things, but also they're gorgeous. Look at like, and they're so stylish.
I want Niko to have their own fashion brand. I want to see
I'm subscribing. Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where we always, sometimes it's difficult when many things are happening at once, but we always want the visual, like the costuming of a character to represent stuff about them, right? And like, it's not an accident that Niko is very stylish and also comes from a background where they would be seen by thousands of people at a time, right? Like it's definitely something that plays in. And I mean, I like bragging about different teams, right? It's like, I think our like world building teams and our visual teams are like some of the best period just ever. And like, I think you see it with stuff like this.
I see in the chat that there's a question about where does Niko actually get their hair cut and dyed, and the Niko stories have actually answered that question, and I can maybe minorly spoil that they have a stylist on Theros, and as Chris was saying, as a public figure on Theros who had a point of view and wanted to present themselves in a certain way, that was something that was available to them.
Niko might not be used to being a storybook hero, but they're actually pretty used to being a well-known public figure, looking awesome, having people want their autograph.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's super awesome. So we're coming up on time, and I wanted to before we all, and what do you, as one of the participants who are part of the creation of Niko, what do you hope players take away from Niko's story? What do you hope that you gifted out into the world with being a part of this process?
I mean, I'll take the obvious answer and go first, so other people have to think more. if something I've worked on, especially something I've worked this hard on, can help even one individual person in the world feel a little more welcome, a little more like they belong in the cool fantasy stories where anything can happen, I've succeeded. I'm living my dream. That's what I want to give. Just any person who sees a little of themselves that they didn't see before in our worlds is absolute victory.
Uh-huh.
Now you all have to think of more interesting answers.
No, let it hang.
I hope people really enjoy playing with this magic card on Arena. No, I do hope people do that because it is a sweet card. One of the only a tiny fun fact before we go. One of the only things that changed about the design of the Niko card was that the first draft, they were artifacts, and I think it was Jeremy Jarvis who was like, they're not artifacts, like. And it was like the connection to Theros and the fact that they're magically summoned. It was like, they should be enchanted. That would make so much sense. But I mean, I will plus one what Katie said. It is awesome to be able to share a little bit of like my personal journey through this character with other people, and I hope that people, non-binary people and binary people, are able to like find something in this character that resonates with them. I think that. Yeah, and I think a big thing for me is I hope that if you're a kid who's growing up with Magic now, that you're introduced to a non-binary person as just being a character in your favorite game, and that helps to normalize and get more people to be aware of. Like the non-binariness is something that still I think a lot of people are still learning about for the first time, especially younger people, and I hope that this helps with that.
For me,
go ahead.
Sarah.
No, please go ahead.
All right. In addition to the things that Chris and Katie have already said, Niko for me represents the power of thinking critically and skepticism and dedication to their goals. Those are values that I think everybody can get behind and really see a pathway to success and a great life through evaluating and taking a closer look at things that they might have otherwise thought were entrenched.
And that takes courage too, which I think Niko may not be the most stereotypical charge into battle face first type of brave, but I think they're an incredibly courageous character for that interrogation of their most deeply held beliefs.
Right. The ability to resolve their own cognitive dissonance is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a real relationship between Niko's journey of sort of self-discovery and needing to move beyond Theros to accomplish that journey. And there's a real parallel, I think, for me in my own experience in the world there that I hope players will take away, which is push yourself, like step outside your bubble, explore the world, explore other points of view, because you'll discover things about yourself. You'll become more you. And that to me is sort of in one way, like I guess emotionally for me, the most important thing that Niko is really about is openness to new experiences, to new things, to new people, and a sort of acceptance and welcoming of those things. And then the ability to sort of say, and now let me understand what that means for me and who I am.
Yeah, to add to that, it's not just openness as in being receptive, but actually pursuing those things.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a bravery to exploring the unknown, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us here today. And thank you everybody who tuned in to support us and to listen to this panel. Gonna give, I think we're gonna wrap up in another couple of minutes. Any final parting thoughts, anything you guys wanna say out for the audience who joined us today? We had some really awesome positive comments. Thank you guys all so much for being here. I'm so grateful that we have you, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else may be coming down the pipeline someday. We can't comment on it. Sorry, I probably shouldn't have gone there. But
I think our
definitely,
NDAs allow us to say it's exciting.
it's exciting. It's super exciting.
Just thank you to everybody in this room. I'm so pleased to have been able to work with you and everybody else on this project.
Yeah, same.
Very much same. This is a pretty awesome, talented group of human beings right here, and I miss working with you in person, but glad to make great stuff.
I miss being able to be closeted in a tiny meeting room. And I mean that sincerely.
Yeah. A snack basket, whiteboard.
You can miss our months.
Certainly not something I thought I would miss, as I definitely do.
Things have changed. And really, thank you to the audience too for your interest and enthusiasm. It's like I have not stopped being overwhelmed and delighted that Nico is getting this positive reception, and if they can be even a little meaningful to any of you out there, that makes my day, my life.
I think some of you are also figures on Twitter as well. If folks do want to like follow along with you or reach out from home, happy to share that. I know that's not everybody. Some of us are just like, no, we just work in the closets at Wizards.
Not good at social media, but I will tweet thoughts into the universe. Maybe you'll receive them.
Yeah, I exist on Twitter, but don't generally engage much.
Same.
I live on Twitter.
Someone has to.
Come engage with me. It helps me to remember that humans exist beyond the walls of my apartment.
I will say, if anybody does want to contact me on Twitter, you're welcome to do that.
How are they reaching you, Garrett?
Shalling, do you mean usernames?
Yeah.
You can put them in our chat here.
Yeah, I think Chris has shared out, so we'll get those shared out if anybody wants to reach out there. Great. Well, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Happy OrcaCon.
Yeah, have a great weekend.
Who wants an awesome Niko wallpaper? Go talk to our OrcaCon admins. They will send you a link for some special swag.
All right. Thank you all.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye, my friends.